All right. Well, it is a little after 7, so we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome to our third discussion on Stamped. My name is Courtney. My co-host is Allie. We're both from Allegheny County Library System. We're super excited to have you all here. We may have a few stragglers popping in, so we'll welcome them as well. We'll go ahead and explain how tonight will work. But before we do have some people helping to moderate tonight's discussion. We have 3 community members, Sonia, Ian, and Pam. If you guys want to wave, if you can, on your screens, they'll be helping, as well as we have Tyler and Kaylee, who are students who will be assisting as well with our discussion. So we're excited to have you guys, and we're excited to have everyone here to discuss an important topic.
Okay, I'm very sorry if you can hear a dog in the background. Can't control the neighborhood noise, but how this works, if you're new to the stamp discussion, is that a question will be posed, and we do ask that people just put in the comments if you would like to speak. That's way not everyone tries to speak at once, and we'll kind of create an order, or if you know how to raise your hand, you can do that as well, which can be found in the participants tab. This is being recorded as well, so it will be up hopefully within the next 2 days. It takes a little while to process, but it will be on the Allegheny County Library System YouTube, and we will announce when it is live on the Facebook. So if there's anyone who misses it, or if you want to send it to someone to watch, feel free to do so. I'm trying to remember. All the howling is distracting me. Yeah, did I miss anything, Courtney?
No, I think that is everything. If you have just joined us and have not put where you're from in the comments, we'd love to see where you guys are joining us from, whether it's Cumberland or from farther away. We're just excited to have you guys get started and discuss, like I said, such an important topic. If we forget anything, we'll add it later on, because sometimes that happens. So we'll go ahead and get started with just your initial reactions. What was your initial reaction to this section? What parts stood out to you? And I'm just going to open that up to the group just to get the discussion rolling. I'll go ahead and start. I count down my 5 seconds. So initially, this was a larger section, so it was a bit harder to get through. As usual, you know, this is hard to read. Just kind of working through this. We're going to be talking, of course, Abraham Lincoln and the different Confederate leaders and things in this, but it always shocks me kind of what we read about in history versus what actually happens. It just is always such a stark difference. We're going to talk about that more tonight, but it always is just shocking to me. All right, Tyler, you're next.
I agree with you completely. It was a very, very long and dense section. But what really stood out to me, perhaps more than the other chapters, though it's a running theme in the book, is talk about intersectionality. And in the way that he made it explicitly clear, the common ground and the common enemy of oppression that all these different factions of America faced. Whether they were the oppressed slaves, freed slaves, poor whites, white women of color, who are all, how there was no unity, and how that lack of unity consistently made everyone else's problems even worse. I really felt that this section above other really stressed the need for unification in the face of oppression amongst various oppressed groups of people.
for me, what I just, the thread throughout the whole section, was continuing with the racist ideas and the people that are against each other, even, the people that were Black people, and they're talking about biracial people, and they're trying to find scientific evidence to keep, the Black people oppressed, even down to Derwin's experiments, and I guess the other guy, the psychologist that did the skulls. And it was just really interesting to see how many different scientific approaches and different ways they were looking at trying to keep the races separate, for the longest time in those early chapters in the 1800s. And it's just pretty amazing. But it was also impressive that, some Black historians also begin to rise up and speak out in these chapters, with Frederick Douglass. And of course, Garrison was the thread. He was throughout, just kept pushing on with his newspaper articles, and he just kept it, even though people tried to shut him down, he just kept moving forward and just kept going for the cause. So I think that was pretty striking for me, but just to see the, Black people rise up and start speaking out in terms of their rights, women's rights, and, Africans' rights and so forth. So I thought that was pretty strong in this chapter, these chapters.
Yeah, thanks, Sonia. For anyone that just joined us, if you'd like to add to any thoughts about your initial reactions, you can either use that raise your hand feature in the participants tab, or add to the comments that you'd like to speak next. All right, I guess we'll go ahead and get started with section 1, our question number 1. Sonia, you go ahead and lead. Thank you.
Question 1. Although abolitionists were successful in their attempt to end slavery, were they effective in bringing racial equality? It's part 1 of the question. Part 2, would you deem the abolitionist racism as a necessary evil for freedom? That's question 1. And as I was reading through the chapters, it was very clear that the Black abolitionists face racism from the white abolitionists. Especially with Garrison. I mean, they all, like, for example, Garrison's movement as being a Black abolitionist, and the liberator of the newspaper writer for the Liberator. I mean, he has always put his thoughts out there in the news for people to see, just to move the movement forward. But he really didn't like to participate in the political parties, and that's what the white abolitionists are trying to move their platform forward, in terms of bringing things to light. But the Black abolitionists, they just basically wanted to speak the facts, and they wanted to be recognized and be respected. But the white abolitionists, as I said, they even paid Frederick Douglass to talk to audiences about his experiences as a runaway. I mean, they put him on a platform. So this was one Black that they found that was going to help move things forward. But then, there for a while, when Frederick Douglass would veer off the topic, they told him, you need to stick to the story, because they didn't want to talk about, the slavery. And, well, he talked about him being a slave and a runaway. They just wanted to highlight that story and not have him go off on his philosophy and his, what he felt about, slavery and all that. So, and they even still, when they introduced him still as a thing, quote, a piece of Southern property. So still, their view of Blacks was still pretty demeaning, even though they had him on his platform to speak. So I don't think there's any racial equality that was even though the abolitionists ended slavery, I still don't think they were together as a group, as a union. You still had your white abolitionists, and they had a different platform, and you had your black abolitionists, and I didn't see them really coming together at any point. And that was the first part. Does anyone else have any comments on that? No comments? And okay, I guess the second part.
Oh, Suzanne raised her hand actually, Sonia.
Pardon me?
Suzanne raised her hand.
Oh, okay.
So Suzanne, you're next.
I guess I would say that one of the things that the white abolitionists had was access to capital. Many of them were wealthy, came from wealthy families, could reach out to their church networks to raise money, to get things published. So you had to have that connection, because that's one thing that, African Americans were capital, but they didn't have access to capital. So I think that was why that union sort of had to be. And I also think that using stories like Escape from Slavery helped to raise more capital. They were interesting and they were dramatic, and it got people, wanting to hear more, and they were heroic. So the argument that, enslaved people are just like you and I wasn't gonna cut it in terms of raising money. So it was sort of a way to move the movement forward by sort of getting in bed with folks that are sort of using you as a prop.
Thanks, Susan.
Any other comments about that section? Or there's the second part of the question was, would you deem the abolitionist racism as a necessary evil for freedom? And I think it absolutely was. I mean, they had to hear both sides of the story. I mean, it got to, it led them to a movement to move them forward. But without that, without the different sides, I don't think, people would realize what really was taking place. They had to hear it from both sides.
Thanks. Sarah has her hand raised. We'll go ahead and have her go next.
I remembered how to do it. Yay. Learning something new every night. So all of that, of course, all of those things for sure, just kind of bouncing off both Sonia's comments and Suzanne's comments, that it seems clear that for so many abolitionists, the racial equality was not part of their goal, so that is so complex, because I think that that's the easy read, that's the whitewashed history, is to kind of let people believe that somehow somebody cannot, that abolitionism and segregationism are somehow mutually exclusive, which is just absolutely not the case. Not even a little bit. Like, there are so few abolitionists who are really in that category of being even assimilationist, yet alone, that, like, kind of at best, I guess, but certainly not anti-racist. And so, to the second part, for sure, it seems pretty clear that there needed to be a movement, exactly, and how that to capture the inertia of that movement was critical. But it certainly was almost antithetical to the idea of racial equality. They certainly weren't moving those things in the same direction.
And many times, like with, I think it was Calvin Cotton, I mean, they were very forthright in saying there's no such thing as equality among men, neither God nor man, ever instituted that. And then they dealt with the science, there's virtual consensus among the racial, the scholars, that racial equality did not even exist. So they, like, I agree with you, they just didn't look at it. It wasn't part of the talk. Just wasn't part of the talk. So And I think just trying to keep the races still separated, like I said, with the, I think it was an anthropologist, and they had to, you know, do the math and the examining the skulls and the difference in the measurements and so forth, and the Caucasians and the African Americans, and then they said the bigger the skull, the bigger the intellect of the person. My gosh, and people, but that was rolled out, you know. And somebody else came along, you know. I mean, there are people just trying to prove things, and when it comes down to the bottom line, there's just no, you know, no difference. But they kept trying to prove it, you know, with different, you know, through science and math and various other things. But there were differences in the, you know, the ethnic races.
All right, we are actually going to move to question 2 because Kaylee isn't feeling very well, so she's going to post the question to the group. And we might come back to that first one.
So I'm going to try and get through as much as I can, guys. I've been out all day and I'm an asthmatic, so the weather kicks me in the butt every time this year. And it just started kicking into me here a few minutes ago. So I actually found this book very interesting. I didn't know that much into history because in school I wasn't a very history person. I know that's hard to believe with like living in Allegheny and Garrett counties. It's a really like historic area, but I was very surprised on some of the notes that I was reading about like Abraham Lincoln, especially how, where was it? When they were talking about like the debate and stuff, it was very, very not what I was expecting personally, because I only learned like he was the president and so on and so forth. I didn't know anything about like the speech, and I didn't know what actually he got into. And yes, I agree that the history in the schools this time is like very whitewashed, because I'm a senior at Frostburg now, and when I was in school, I was still whitewashed, and I don't even know what to say because it left me speechless, honestly. More than anything, I just had to keep rereading, and I'm still speechless after rereading it. But I'm going to open the floor to you guys on what new information did you learn about him, and how does this contrast with the way Lincoln is portrayed in American history textbooks and popular culture?
Melanie, you can go ahead next.
Well, from what I remember from history from high school and the one semester I had it in college before I changed majors and things like that, I never knew that Abraham Lincoln had more racist viewpoints. I figured it probably, since it was part of the Confederacy and everything, but some of these, how he was just so wishy-washy on things, and just kind of like, he believes one thing, but he doesn't want equality for this, but he ended up having to do it because he was scared because of the war and the generals coming into DC and whatnot and everything. But I never knew that. All I knew was Honest Abe. Just as Allie was saying, you know, it was just like, I never knew about the other part of what happened to help, you know, bring the Emancipation Proclamation to what it actually, you know, was signed in and everything like that.
Thanks, Melanie. We'll go ahead and do Tom, then Mary Ann.
I guess I wanted to put a question out there. I've heard the term whitewashed a lot in the past 2 classes, and I've been struggling with that. I really thinking about it a lot since last class. And I guess what I'm wondering is if our history, I know that it is written primarily by white historians, but I'm wondering if it's more hero washed than whitewashed. And I was trying to think of some counterexamples, and Martin Luther King and Jackie Robinson came to mind for me. I've studied both of their lives quite a bit too, and watched some movies about them as well, and read Jackie Robinson's autobiography. And neither one of them was a perfect human being either. They're amazing heroes, and I'm so proud of what they've done. But I'm just wondering if our book is, it's titled "The History of Racism in America." That's the focus of the book, is to find every racist thought that every human being ever had in the history of the United States. And I'm just wondering if in the course of our history, are we focusing too heavily on the racist thoughts? Obviously, that's the point of the class, but is that overriding the good that people have done? And I guess my question is it more hero washing that we're doing? Is that we look at our heroes and try to because we want to have heroes, that we tend to ignore maybe the weaknesses that they've had as human beings. I don't know. I guess I'm throwing that out there. It's just brainstorming.
I think we'll go ahead and let that question kind of simmer in the comments. Since we have two other people after you, and if we want to come back to it in the discussion, we can do so. I just want to make sure that the thoughts are heard for that question. So you guys feel free to add it in the comments as well. I know sometimes that gets into some hot discussion. All right, so Mary Ann is next.
Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. I'm not going to address Tom's question, which is an interesting one, except to briefly say we have a tendency and have had a tendency in the United States to teach history as military history and the history of great men. And so there is that tendency to idealize certain men as heroes, but it's also the case that our history has very much been whitewashed. I'm kind of not really surprised, but it's really sad to think that, I think, was it Allie who just spoke? No, not Allie. Who was it who just spoke? It was a senior at Frostburg. Kaylee, right? Kaylee, okay. That Kaylee is saying that she never encountered a lot of this history in her classes. So that's not very different from, me attending high school from 1967 to 71 and still being given the same view of Abraham Lincoln as this great heroic man who, quote unquote, freed the slaves. And it is honestly not until I read the chapter of this book that I realized exactly how limited the Emancipation Proclamation was. That there were many slaves in the border states and elsewhere who were not freed. And that this was a very strategic attempt, out of Lincoln's concern, which was not really about ending slavery, but about trying somehow to bring the southern states back into the Union. At this point in the war, this was going to help them win the war. So it wasn't this wonderful, idealistic desire to free the slaves. And I think we're still getting that heroic portrait of Lincoln in something like the recent Steven Spielberg film, Lincoln, which, if anyone has seen that, he's still portrayed as pretty heroic, although human and flawed, but not to this extent. So that's it. on to who's next.
I think it's Diane who's next.
Hello? Oh, hello. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Oh, good. I'm on the phone and on the iPad because my satellite's so bad today. But Tom made me think of something, and I have a little bit of an answer for his question, that we have these heroic figures in history that we look up to and that have this dual kind of perception. Once you know history a lot better, you realize that there's other things underneath. And that made me think that even with racism, it's not about individual people as much as all of these laws and regulations that got embedded into the systems that they had to govern. So the way that our system is set up in the government is that two different parties try to work toward consensus. So Lincoln was in a position where he maybe had a moral calling to do what he thought was correct, what was right, to have freedom and end slavery. But on the other hand, he had the people with the power, the people that did not believe that, the people that he had to bargain with. And bargaining in the sense of slavery just wasn't going to work. You either had freedom or you had torture and cruelty. And for him to take the stand to end slavery, it was sort of anti-government, because the government is all about consensus building. So I think I just wanted to end. So that sort of Tom made me think about that. Mary Ann, some of the things that she said too. We do have a whitewashed history, and I think going back to what Suzanne said in some of the first discussions is that money, power, people that have the power, the prestige, they rule those systems and they rule those regulations and laws that get embedded into the way that we deal with each other. And it's the systems that we really need to change, and those are more difficult because regulations are so embedded in regulations, the way that we talk to each other, the consensus building. It's just a whole culture that makes it difficult to do what morally is the right thing to do. And that's what I wanted to say. Thanks.
Thanks, Marianne. Yeah. If you guys have not read the comments, please do so. We have, of course, a great definition of whitewashing by Suzanne. The definition of whitewashing is to attempt to conceal unpleasant facts about a person or organization. It actually comes from painting. Remember Tom Sawyer and the picket fence? It's truly ironic that we also we're talking about white people doing the whitewashing. And then, of course, Tyler Robinson, our hero worship is completely whitewashed. We create our heroes, we don't find a hero, and then try to ignore their faults. Nation's heroes are canon that's been passed down through generation. And who is in this canon of heroes? That's one's acceptable to teach, the one's not acceptable to the dominant class within society. And so just make sure you guys take a look. There's some great comments in there, just highlighting a few. Of course, Sarah highlighted a great short video about it. And just make sure you guys check that out. Do we have any more thoughts on the initial question about Abraham Lincoln or whitewashing and its definition? You know, how does your view change about Lincoln or whitewashing? All right. We'll go ahead and move on to our next question. This next question is by Tyler, who is a local student. Hi, Tyler. We'll go ahead and have you read our third question for tonight.
Thank you. Considering the speeches, writings, and actions of the Confederate leaders included in this book, how do these words contradict or shape the heritage not hate message that some people today use when discussing the Confederacy or defending the use of Confederate imagery?
All right, Marianne, go ahead.
All right, just needed to unmute there.
Okay.
I think that's a wonderful question. And the book makes so clear what the intentions of those who were part of the Confederacy were. You have Jefferson Davis's own statement that racial equality, and here's where we get the title of our book, folks, stamped from the beginning. So that was kind of a nice little surprise in the chapter because I didn't realize initially where the title came from. And then I think, I wonder how many people are already aware of Alexander Stephens, who was the vice president of the Confederacy, and his famous cornerstone speech, or I should say his infamous cornerstone speech, which pretty much lays it out, which says, you know, African people are inferior. The inequality that we've created in the United States is what the Confederacy is built on. It just couldn't be more obvious that they really based the secession on certainly their desire to maintain slavery, and justified that by saying there was no way that African people could ever be equal to the white, quote unquote, white race. So if people kind of miss that, the Alexander Stephens quote is on page 214. And I would read the whole speech, the cornerstone speech, because it's disgusting and it's illuminating for anyone who tries to tell you, oh, this is all about heritage. The Civil War wasn't about slavery, because he makes very clear what it was about. So thanks. I'm interested to hear what other people have to say now.
We have a comment from Sue Jenkins. Their words convey white supremacy. Hate is the heritage of hate. Suzanne, did you have your, okay, go ahead. You are next. I just wasn't sure if it was up from before or not, so go ahead.
I had my hand up before, but I took it back down because everybody had such great things to say. But I think it's really, really important that we unpack this heritage. And it goes back to Lincoln and what he wanted. He didn't want to free the slaves. He wanted to preserve the Union. So once the war is over, do you pretend that you've conquered the South, or do you bring them back into the fold? And their desire was to bring them back into the fold in order to preserve the Union. And one of the ways to bring them back into the fold is to ignore their war crimes. And that is what has been done for a century and a half. We have ignored war crimes. We have, I mean, there were war crimes before the Civil War in the North as well. But now in Germany, you are starting to see people wave Nazi flags and quote from Mein Kampf. But after World War II, I would say into the mid-90s, you never heard anybody talking about the heritage of Nazism. But we have created this romanticized view of the South in order, I think it was originally begun in order to bring the Union back together, and it was done on the backs of African Americans, and it still is. And you know, I went to school in the 70s at the University of South Carolina, and you just wouldn't believe in 1970 the hoop skirts and the blackface, and it was such a shock that people found this in no way troubling, but it's because that was the cost, I think, culturally, of bringing the Union back together. I'm not in any way saying we should have paid that price, but I think that was the price we paid, and now we have to pay reparations.
Yeah, good thoughts, Suzanne. All right, Sarah's next.
To kind of address two things. I just put a piece there in the chat, kind of tying this back to the video I posted. But the thing that you just said, Suzanne, reminded me also of that. I encourage you all, if you have 15 minutes, to check that out, because it has so much to do with the things that we're discussing last week and this week. But the idea of reparations. So I think why this is particularly important to really understand the difficulty, and so to kind of sit and do a lot of work in that difficulty of the complexity of our history, and how, you know, there's nothing that is exactly what it seems in terms of the way that we have historically presented it, and especially to our children, is that the legacy of that remains. Like, that's the problem. You know, it's not just something that is over. The legacy is there. And so that's something that video touches on, is exactly how it's beautifully done in like 13 minutes, how we can trace these problematic policies, and, you know, all the way from slavery through Jim Crow, through contemporary, you know, just what's happening in gentrified neighborhoods in, you know, in urban areas. And that's the issue. It's the presence of the legacy that remains, that if we continue to not, you know, really like give this the attention that is due, and recognize where the connections are to contemporary society, we're never going to ultimately get past that. So I think it's less that we're not heroic people in our past who did all sorts of amazing things for the growth of this country as a whole that have led us to where we are. But it's we cannot ignore the negative side of that, because not just because it happened, but also because there's still, you know, we're still living in it in many ways.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. I went to Mount Vernon this past weekend, which is a fantastic place if you ever get to go. But one of the most interesting things is, you know, this is the first time I had been to a monument, been to one of these places, a plantation, after all of this has happened, and really discussing race a lot deeper, and discussing what's going on in the world, and, you know, just looking and seeing, oh yeah, Washington had 300 some slaves and only freed 150 of them when he died, and there were still 200 some, and everything you kept seeing that was built by slaves. It was just really, really quite interesting. So I just wanted to leave you guys thinking about that as you go and visit perhaps sites, as things start to progress after the pandemic. You might start thinking a little differently. It's also interesting that the slave, their burial ground was there, and they had markers and marked down. It was right next to Washington's grave as well. And just seeing the juxtaposition of the ornate marble-built grave site versus just markers where they might have been buried for hundreds some slaves. So anyways, those were just my thoughts. We're gonna go ahead and highlight a few comments in the section, or in our comment section here. Allie, we can't learn and do better if we are ignorant of the ugly parts, which does tie into the ignorance of what the Confederacy stood for, absolutely. And then Tom, I agree. Good spoken points as well. Wonder if this is the age-old question of breadth versus depth. I think this racism piece is depth that is worthwhile, absolutely. Yeah. Do we have any more thoughts on this question here about that, the Confederacy and heritage versus hate? All right, Melanie, you can go ahead next.
Unfortunately, with the times that we have right now and everything, hate, I think, is actually growing faster with some of the current political leaders that we have. And it seems like with everything going on, if people don't start looking more closely at the history and reading and trying to talk within these forums and things like that, it's going to really kind of, we're going to set our country back even further, I think, because and also with the upcoming elections and things like that, it's just going to end up putting our country further back and trying to dig out of these racist views and things like that and it's going to polarize our country even further and make us more of a laughing stock in the world. I wish more people participated and read and did things like this to help bring more of an education and hopefully bring people to the polls, or at least voting by mail, to help get to progress this movement forward so that we can vote out the people that are causing the hate and spewing the hate on a national and state and local levels.
I think if Stamped has taught us anything, it's 1 step forward, 2 steps back. Seems like that just continues to be our history.
Yeah, Tyler, you are next. So go ahead.
I think both this question and the last question about Lincoln really drive home how, in both the hero worship of Lincoln and the say commodification of Southern culture, it's really indicative of the fact that we are not willing or able as a country, as people, to look into our history, to look into the past. The fact that it is that people feel almost slighted when you acknowledge the evils of Lincoln is just the unwillingness of us to look in our own mirror and see the faults of us as individuals and collectively as a country. And that really, really shines through in both the deification of Lincoln and this kind of pride that people feel towards the Confederate roots without understanding or caring what it actually is, or perhaps caring but concealing it behind lies about proud heritage. We're unwilling to look in that mirror. We're unwilling to see our own faults and the faults of us as a whole.
Thanks, Tyler. Yeah, it's often hard to look in that mirror and see, our faults, especially as a country that is all about ourselves and think that we're the most important and the best place in the entire world without looking at a hard look at what actually is going on. Yeah, Allie, many are comfortable in their ignorance. Not you guys. You guys are willing to have this discussion and dialogue, which is fantastic. This will be my little plug. Make sure that this dialogue that you have tonight doesn't end tonight, that you continue to dialogue about race and have discussions about what's going on in the world and continue to get people out to vote. Voting is always great, no matter what sides you guys are on, but making sure that we're having good dialogue and discussion about everything. So thank you guys for joining us for that again. We'll allow one more comment for this section here. If anyone's interested, please either raise your hand or, oh, Tom, you're next.
I guess I hear in several of the recent comments about comparisons of our country to other countries. And I guess I want to first acknowledge that I am absolutely in favor of rooting out every bit of racism that exists in our country. I find it appalling. The things I'm reading in this book, I find absolutely appalling and disturbing, and I wish it wasn't part of our history. with that said, I was so disturbed by this that I felt like, my goodness, I live in this rotten place. Like, how do I exist here? And I did a little research just to find out, like, how does our racism compare to racism in other countries? And I don't know, this gave me a little, I'm going to hold up this figure. There's this map here, and you can look it up, but we're actually one of the blue countries, which means we have less racism than the red countries out there based on a survey that was given. And I'd encourage you to look it up. But I guess what I'm suggesting is that, yes, we have racism problems, and yes, we should work to get rid of them. But that maybe it's more hopeful than we think. And maybe there's a lot of people that really love each other out there. And we got to keep spreading that a little more and keep working on it. But I guess what I'm saying, it's a little more hopeful than maybe I feel sometimes at the end of reading this book.
Do you have a link to that? And if you have a link, Tom, you can go ahead and add that to the comments. There always is hope as far as things go. We'll go ahead and have Ian respond, and then we'll move on to our next question.
I'll just make this quick. I can understand that it may not seem as racist as it seems. Again, some people may not be racist. I feel like it could be lower than most countries. However, in response to that, we need to understand that it's not just about people holding hands and singing "Kumbaya." It is a systemic thing that we need to fix and we need to take care of. So I can understand the chart. I can appreciate about it, but it's deeper than just, I don't like you because you're black or whatever it is. It is a very systemic thing. So that's all I had to say about it.
Thank you, Ian. All right. We'll go ahead and move on to our next question, which I think we have Pam leading question number 4. I'm not sure where she went, but that's okay. I'll go ahead and pose the question to the group. Sometimes technical difficulties do happen. Question number 4, these chapters show how many abolitionists, including William Lloyd Garrison, they were ahead of their time in some ways, but still had many problematic views about race. What implications does this have for modern day leaders? How can we hold people accountable as they do anti-racism work? And you have your hand up from before? Is that from before? Yeah. Okay. Then Sarah.
So I think that this is probably a good spot to sort of connect back to the idea of, I think reparations may sort of to a general audience may be a really loaded term for some reason, but I think that you have to think of it contextually in this idea of how particularly the middle class builds wealth, which is generational. It's not something that one generation generally is able to, create something that is sustainable. So when you look at and this is something that's highlighted in the video, when you look right now at this current state of middle class, or not middle class, but just of wealth across the country, the average white household is something like $140-some thousand is the wealth of the average white household, and the average Black household is something like $4,000. So why? And that's what I'm talking about, this idea of legacy. And I think this is what connects into the implication for modern day leaders, is to really look at that and understand that there are so many policies, and this connects to what Ian was saying about systemic racism. It's so far beyond the idea of just like getting along, or how we individually view each other. It's much more about how these things have compounded over the course of generations and have led to deep inequities that are insurmountable without clear policy procedural guidelines that the system that has been set against a particular group of people now recognizes that and shifts gears and becomes supportive and intervenes in that. So I think that that's the most succinct way I can I can talk about that, but it's definitely something that I think will hopefully, I have not read ahead, so I'm thinking that we'll probably get into a bit more of that as it goes across time. But just think about in a really short way about how, so if you're talking about like my great grandparents on my dad's side, they came to this country from Austria, and they had land in Austria that they sold, and they bought some property in Illinois and in Iowa. And so that has never left my family. It has not that I'm wealthy by any stretch of the imagination, but it certainly has provided a foundation for, and that's just my dad's side of the family. My mom's side of the family, they had one of the largest farms in Mineral County. And that was, two generations back. That was something that my great grandparents established, and then it came to my grandparents and dispersed among 9 children. But you're talking about a couple generations back for people who live in this country who their ancestors were working for nothing. They weren't being compensated for their labor. And then one generation after that, there's a Jim Crow happened, so anybody who was able to accumulate something, things are taken away. And then you add on top of that some pieces about just in Cumberland, when 68 was created here, it curves because it went through it was easiest to take some land away through eminent domain, through the Pine Avenue neighborhood. It cut off a whole section of Pine Avenue. And then now with the eminent domain issue over here in Rolling Mill, there's what are the same guys, he lost his family home on 68, and then they're trying to take it away from him over here, the same family right here. So it's impossible to, and then you add in another thing about, I could go on. Okay, so I'm not going to continue to go on and take up more than my 2 minutes, but just there are things just to simmer on.
Yeah, generational wealth is definitely a big factor in all of this. Going back to Mount Vernon, we think of good old George Washington. He was a farmer. He made all his money being that surveyor and doing all his fun stuff. He had generational wealth. There's the reason he had the plantation before he had all this stuff. And it's easy to see how it just builds and builds and builds, even with today's people in power, which of course, yeah, Suzanne, that's why racism of the GI Bill, Social Security, and redlining has impacted generations. Absolutely, yeah. Do we have any more thoughts regarding implications that this has on modern day leaders and how we can hold them accountable as they do anti-racism work? Oh, we have 2 participants who raised their hands. Tyler?
Less so about the implication that it has on leaders and more the implication it has on people like me, Courtney, Allie, etc., as white allies. And that's that we need to be willing to be held accountable for what we do, for the mistakes that we're likely going to inevitably make. We cannot be so cowardly and prudish that we are unwilling to be called out if we mess up. because otherwise, if we have all these people that just are unwilling to be called out, unable to face their own racism, then it just fractures in all way. It just keeps fracturing a movement that needs more and more people just to keep going. We as allies, one of our principal roles, one of our principal duties is to be willing to be called out by minorities, by people who are oppressed. We have to be willing to be called out in the ways that we are complicit in that, in the ways that we continually, even as we're sitting here trying to fight racism and oppression, how we are inevitably caught up within it.
All right, Ian is next, and then Tom.
I was going to feed off of what Tyler was also saying. If you are called out for being problematic or any way, shape, or form, it is not a bad thing. You have to be held accountable. You need to realize that the mistakes you make can affect the movement in the long run. So it's not necessarily a bad thing. I kind of bring it in cancel culture as well. It's just holding people accountable for what they do, because it's very easy to say, I messed up, I apologize, and I can do better. There's no time to have your pride hurt during a time where we're seeing black men and women dying in the streets and in their bed. So for the white allies, abolitionists, and comrades in the room right now, I will say, if you're being problematic, there's no shame in doing that. Just listen and just embrace it. And this is how we're gonna make things better, by learning the mistakes that we're making, because nobody is inherently born racist. It's all taught, and we have small little moments where we do something that can be perceived as racist or prejudiced or bigoted, and it's important to be self-aware, to pay attention to that, so you can do better. So that's all right. I'm done.
Thanks, Ian. I think Tom was next.
I guess I just wanted to acknowledge that this is a big problem, and we need to keep working on it. Ian, I've been trying to live your 5-step plan since last class, and I've been trying my best to do that. But I also was just, and maybe this is like a topic for discussion next class, but are we going to do something, like, I don't know, some kind of action project as part of as this group? Because I just feel like there should lead us to some type of action that is, more concrete. So I'm just going to throw that out there, maybe for next class's discussion.
Yeah, so just kind of responding to Tom, we of course have 2 more discussions after this. This is section 3. We were potentially going to open up after the 5th one to say if we'd like to just kind of have an open-ended, freewheeling discussion. And that might be something you guys decide to do. We, of course, we have NAACP, who we have members who are part of that here. We have ACM, Frostburg State. We have some Allegheny County Public School individuals. And so, I think we could definitely come up with a few things. But if you want to get plugged in, Tom, we have some great groups here and some great representatives here who know how to kind of get you connected to do more. This is a good start, though, having that dialogue, having that discussion. And Ian, if you can post your 5 points in the comments, that would be great. I did put it in the comments for you. That would be wonderful. All right, do we have any other thoughts on this section here, on this question?
I just want to say, Courtney, that, it's amazing to me in the last 6 months of the pandemic that you see, in the sports world, people are coming to the forefront and acknowledging, their wrongs, and if they've been racist in any kind of way. Modell, I mean, he's huge in NFL, and that there's some unity starting to happen in the sports arena. And I think that's huge because everybody looks up to sports figures. And they're coming out of the woodwork, in different arenas, your sports, not only the NBA, but the football league, and then I guess, what was it, this summer, the car racetrack car driver came out, and I just think it's amazing. I mean, it would be great if it was more women, more people of color, but then you have, things are starting to happen slow. Things are starting to open up slowly. And I think it's great that these new leaders are starting to emerge. And I think that's what's going to happen, is that they see other people, they're taking a stance because they are leaders in their arena in sports. And I think other people will step forward as well. And I think that's a good thing. It's very positive.
Yeah, absolutely. Jody?
Yes, I agree, Sonia. I think that the vehemence, that it's getting worse, and I think one reason for that is their vehemence is so strong because the numbers are against them. The majority of people in the United States recognize, and we are stepping forward, we're examining our own lives, we're seeing our white privilege, and we're working through it, through dialogues like this. And it's frightening to the far right. And I don't know how bad it's going to be in the next 4 years, but eventually we're going to come through this, and we're going to be better because of it. And going along with what Sarah said, I think it has so much to do with land, with property, and the fact that how things would have been different had the former slaves been actually given their 20 acres of land and a mule, like they were promised in the beginning. But every time they began to show that they were able to be successful in our capitalist system, they were destroyed. Their entire communities would be destroyed again and again and again and again. And there's so many towns in which that happened in the early 1900s that I've just been reading about. And I think one of the psychological problems that's being used to convince a lot of people that are frightened in the far right is to let them feel like the old, if in order for me to become elevated economically, in order for African Americans to become elevated economically, my economic success is going to be diminished. And that isn't the case. In reality, if we lift the boats up in all the people in our country, including the poor, everybody's going to be better in the long run. And so, and the other problem is lying in the news, lying in the debates. And I hesitate to even watch the debate tonight. And I'm hoping there'll be some fact checking going on, but it's criminal. And we can't stand for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jody. Yeah, it's hard. All right, we're going to go ahead and move into question number 5 because we are getting close to the end of our discussion tonight. So we'll let Ann lead our last discussion question.
Thank you, Courtney. And before I get into the next question, I just want to say, if you are looking to get involved and help out and have call to actions or something of the like, there are ways to. There are like Courtney said, members of NAACP here. And this Saturday, whoever is available, there is a march going on for Breonna Taylor. We'll be having it downtown around 2 p.m. And we'll be marching from one of the churches down to City Hall again, just like we did for Juneteenth. And basically saying we'll have some speakers, we'll have some That's my performances, everything I would like. So make sure if you're available, come down this Saturday in downtown Cumberland. And the one thing we need to make sure, if you want to have call to actions thing, that's great, but make sure that you continue this conversation and you sustain pressure no matter what. So, and this kind of leads into the next question, I guess. And it's, do you think Black leaders such as Frederick Douglass and Sojourner Truth could have been more effective in leading change in society if they had more backing from white abolitionists, or would their increased support be in vain? I'll let you guys answer because I have my own thoughts when it comes. This pertains to today, in my opinion, but I want to hear what you guys have to say about it first before I give my thoughts.
Ian, I just wanted to say, I think it was you added the word white abolitionists, and that was, I guess there were white and blacks, but it just says abolitionists. So I didn't know what that, if you were just talking about white abolitionists, but the writing says abolitionists. I guess
I misspoke.
Right?
I misspoke. I apologize.
But I think Frederick Douglass and Sojourner Truth, I think, yeah, if the abolitionists, white or black, they just didn't all come together to support, them totally, and that couldn't have hurt them at all to do that. But Sojourner Truth, I mean, she was standing on her own ground by herself with her, with her great speech that she made, "Ain't I a Woman?" I mean, that was like the best feature in the book for me. To see her be in this white audience, with all her, they said she was like 6 feet tall, amazing, the only black woman there, and walked up and the white women were hackling her and white men were hackling her, but she kind of, as Ibram Kendi said in his book, she hit it with the double blow because she was talking to men in her poem, or whatever you would say, talking about her big muscles and how she can outwork and out-eat. I mean, she attacked the men, on their racist ideas, and then she attacked the women, on the male and their sexist ideas of women are weak, and she's talking about both African American, all women. She was there for African American women and just all women's rights and equality, and for the racist ideas of females, they just told her, go sit down. And she just stood up there and, as staunch as she could and just gave it to them. And I think just her, yeah, she could have had more people on her bandwagon. I think it would have, increased her support. But same thing with Frederick Douglass, but he was outspoken and said what he needed to say, as a speaker. And I know he and Garrison got into it because they had a difference of opinion on some things, but because Garrison didn't, kind of shut him down when he was talking about the Northern racism. But I think those are great men in our history. And, of course, the more people that you have on your team, the, strength in numbers, that's the key, strength in numbers. That's all I have to say.
If I can just jump in, I guess. I think it's hard to give a full, yes or no to this, if it would have increased their support or not, because when they did speak and were given the platform, people listened and seemed like they were willing to learn, and a lot of times they seemed to change opinions, but I think a lot of abolitionists seemed quite comfortable in being racist. So, they still thought of these Black people as exceptional Black people, and that just wasn't the norm. So I think it's hard to say if it would have, I don't think it would have hurt at all, but it just seemed like so many of them were just so comfortable in believing that they wanted this freedom, but then they didn't want Black people to share the land with them, and then they didn't want them to have power, and they didn't want them anywhere near them. So it's just, they would give them these platforms and still not see them as human. And it's just, it's crazy. So I don't know if there's any good yes or no to that. Who knows if it would have affected that much?
Yeah, it's a big question. There is no yes or no, which is kind of why we pose that. We have a comment that says, I honestly do not know if more support would have made a positive difference. I say this because it may have increased support, or it may have made the opponents even louder. And anything that happens in the world today, someone reacts to it. There's always an equal and opposite reaction, right? And, so, sometimes it makes those, as the comment says, anti-abolitionists even more determined, or it may have swayed them, and it's hard to say. Absolutely. It's hard to know. I mean, we're looking, a couple hundred years later, and we're looking at it from a completely different perspective. All we know is that these abolitionists were not truly anti-racist. Going back to those terms that we talked about in the first discussion, they're absolutely segregationist in nature. And it's easy to see the train of thought that happens to today with some people maybe we know and love, and maybe they don't call themselves racist, but they truly are that segregationist individuals. And why we're having this discussion. Tyler says, it's like they wanted to not have to think about it. Slavery felt more repugnant than the systemic repression to them. They could ignore the humanity of Black people under less visible forms of oppression, abolish slavery to not have to think about the racism. Yeah, absolutely. A lot of times we go, oh, I watched that great documentary. I've done my work. I had this book discussion. I've done my work. I've worked hard. I'm anti-racist. I had my discussion, and then you move on. So another little plug, keep doing the work, keep dialoguing even beyond just this. So, and putting in the work and smiling. There's always more to learn, more to teach, absolutely. All right, do we have any more thoughts regarding our initial question? You can raise your hand. Oh, Jody?
I do think that Sojourner Truth would be a modern day hero today, because if she gave that talk in our times, it would have been on Facebook and nobody would have been able to keep those words from coming out into the public sphere. Whereas back when she did give the talk, if she had had the backing of the abolitionists, they would have had the money to send her message far and wide so that everybody could have read it. Because I didn't even know who she was until college and later, but you have to have money behind you, especially then, in order for your words to get out.
Thanks, Jody. Yeah, money, makes the world go round. Thankfully, today we have ways to get, to have discussions and share knowledge and things. There's always the backlash with that, with a lot of mistruth going out too. But it's amazing what we can do with our little phones in our hands or our computer screens in front of us, and share information and share what amazing people are doing. Ian, did you want to add your comments regarding in response to the question?
So when I thought about this question, when it came to abolitionists and if they would, let me look back home. If Frederick Douglass and Sojourner will have more backing, if it will be more effective in leading. I've thought about this quite a bit. Like not just with this question, but just in general. I honestly feel like yes, you will apply more pressure if you have more people backing you, but it will still cause people who are anti-abolitionists and or anything else like to be a little more louder and to go against everything that you are saying. So I compare that. I would compare it like MLK because he had a lot of people backing him what he was doing, but he was still viewed as a radical human being. I spoke about this on multiple occasions. Same with when you look at what's going on with Colin Kaepernick as well, what he's doing. So no matter what, I feel like it still would have been I feel like if they had more people backing them, it would lead to a better outcome. Again, like you said, it's a hard question, but I feel like it would still remain kind of the same, in my opinion. So
we only have a few more minutes left for tonight's discussion. So at this point, you can either raise your hand regarding your response to this question, or we can open up to discuss any other thing and things that have come to mind during this reading tonight, or something that sparked from earlier tonight in tonight's discussion. So feel free to either use that raise your hand feature in the participants section, or type. All right, I'll go ahead and just read a few of the comments here and let you guys sort of, if you have any last minute thoughts, you can think of them right now. Maureen gave a suggestion to read The Undefeated by Kwame Alexander, and which is also illustrated by Kadir Nelson, which is a great book to read and discuss with any children in our lives. Maureen is also a librarian through Allegheny County Library System. That is a great recommendation. Thank you, Maureen. If you guys haven't checked that out, it is a great, great suggestion. If you have any children in your life, I'm sure we have it through the library system. Anybody else know if that's in our system? I assume it is. If not, we can get it. We do. Thank you, Maureen. Awesome. So you guys can check that out through AlleghenyCountyLibrary.info. Tyler says they may have had more capital from being backed, but they still needed the cultural capital they would not be able to get because they were Black. Yeah, going back to that cultural inequity without that wealth. All right.
Alex said she's got a game at 1 p.m. on Sunday. Riverside.
Tyler also says, or perhaps legitimacy is a better term. Either way, abolitionist support would only be able to do so much by the nature of the skin color you're hated and opposed. Yeah. All right. We have just a few more minutes. Any more thoughts before we close out tonight? Oh, Ian, go ahead.
I just want to say again, thank you for having me read this question and me being part of this conversation. I'm really enjoying this. Like, this is the second one I've been to, and thank you, Courtney. Thank you, Alec, for doing this. It's been iterated multiple times, but I'll keep saying this and keep repeating it. Please, 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 after you shut your screens and go make dinner or watch the debate, which I'm about to do right now, just keep having these conversations and just keep opening up the dialogue with your friends, your families, anybody possible that is willing to listen and actually sit down with it. Don't stretch yourself over people that are set in their ways. They'll understand what they want to understand. But for right now, just keep doing the work you're doing, keep coming to these, and just keep educating yourselves on everything going on. So.
Well, thank you, Ian. Thank you to everyone that joined us tonight and all of our wonderful presenters and students and community members who participated. Thank you, guys. Love having these discussions bi-weekly and being a part of a great community who wants to continue to dialogue. So thank you guys again. Just a reminder, the recording will be up maybe tomorrow. We'll try to get it up for you guys as soon as possible. And
I will also have a link to the comments. So all the comments will be listed on the video description as well. And I will link anything that was also mentioned in the comment section. So any other links. So like the book that Maureen mentioned, I'll link that in the catalog and whatnot as well on the video.
And thank you, Holly. Well, once again, thank you guys. We hope you have a great night, and we'll catch you in 2 weeks for discussion 4. Bye, guys.
Good night.
Good night. See you guys.